Hello there guys, today we'll be talking about something new, which is the German heavy cruiser tech tree. And by something new, I don't mean that they've just been released, because it's been some time since the release of those cruisers. What I meant is something that we didn't really had before in this game that those cruisers bring to the table. First of all, we have very good German secondaries mounted on them that are kinda neat. They have pretty good base span, they don't really require IFHE. They have pretty decent base range, basically battleship level, and the fire chance is also not so bad. On top of that, you can control them manually if you want to, for increased range, and for some really neat tricks that I will explain a little bit later. Those ships also come equipped with, well, torpedoes, because you would kinda expect torpedoes and something like this, and a little bit bigger guns than you would normally expect from a cruiser. Pair it up with standard, better armor than the usual cruiser armor, because, well, Germany, and the classic improved German Hydro. What we also get is the limited fast reloading DCP that we meet on Shlieffen, Kremlin, and stuff like that. That sounds pretty neat, right? How those ships turn like bricks and have very bad rudder, and, well, since they are still cruisers, they don't really get that much HP as a battleship would. So those are basically what I could call a pocket battleship. Basically, what you get is a tiny Schlieffen, or a heavy cruiser that is mixed with a light cruiser a little bit. So how we should actually build them, because before we reach into the battle and do what we want to do with them, we need a proper build. First of all, we want to utilize our amazing secondaries that have properties of battleship secondaries, because they have the same maximum range on tier 10 to 12.5 kilometers of range without our manual mode. With the manual mode, we reach 13.6 kilometers of range with the secondary build, so we definitely want all of the secondary upgrades we can get. On top of that, I really suggest going for propulsion, because we kinda want to do something, as we cannot really turn. At least we can play a little bit with our speed. We don't worry about the fires and floodings thanks to our upgraded DCP. We also want to go for a little bit of concealment, just to get closer to the enemy before our secondaries open up. For Captain build, is nothing really new. We go for cruiser secondary upgrades, adrenaline rush, some superintendent for extra heals is always in handy, concealment. We don't need any IFHE shenanigans, since our secondary is already pen 32, and we don't need really much more on tier 10. Gun feeder is my favorite perk. I spec it basically on any cruiser. You don't really need that, you can go for basically anything. I feel like it can come in handy from time to time. And that basically is our ship ready and prepared. So how are we supposed to play this ship? Well, first of all, what we want to do is find ourselves an island, similar positions to what light cruisers take. We can be a little bit more aggressive and go a little bit closer, but we don't need to. From behind that island, we want to use our secondaries as our main source of damage, since, well, in manual mode they get bonus range. We basically turn out to use small combat. We use them and the PM to farm down and soften up our targets a little bit. Think about tenderizing enemies before the final push. Using secondaries, even in manual mode, won't make us bloom on our main battery range, but on our secondary range, so We don't really get detected that often unless there is a DD that's pretty close to us. As a side note, even if you're in a smoke screen, using your manual control over secondaries won't make you bloom from the smoke screen at all, since they still count as secondaries. That's very important. Later on through the game, we can think about actually pushing. After we soften up the targets, specifically the battleships, we can basically play it kinda like a Shlieffen. Our back turret on the Prinz Adalbert is actually 360, so we don't really need to worry about, well, turning too much. You want to use your main battery and then in the meantime switch to secondary manual control and use that as your actual main source of damage. You want to fire at afts, noses and superstructure of enemy ships with manual control, as those parts are almost guaranteed to be below 32. Secondaries normally aim for the center of mass, hence they hit belt of the ship and don't bend. As controlling them manually can mitigate that basically to zero. They still have some dispersion, so some of them still are gonna hit the parts they don't bend, but us aiming correctly can make significant change, allowing us to swiftly deal with even the toughest targets. Still need to remember that your nose is 27, so it is overmatchable, and you don't get the icebreaker, so you need to angle properly when fighting, for example, something like a Kremlin. Torpedoes also have very bad firing angles, so basically you need to use them as a last resort or when enemy is reloading, otherwise you're exposing too much of your ship to make them worth it. Don't be afraid to use your DCP. It is there for you to survive in a chain of fire rather than for a long period of time. It is good for brawling, but really nothing else. Your 6 km improved German Hydro can come in really handy in pushing, as well since you don't really turn, you need to know ahead of time if torpedoes are coming. Also, spotting enemies through smoke screen is really handy. Keep in mind that you still have kind of big caliber, so you can still overmatch some of the ships. Not really that many, but there are cases where you can use that, like for example fighting Minotaurs. Okay, now I think it's time to show you how to actually play this by giving you an example of a game. Okay, first of all we spawn on the flank, but we don't want to be on open waters pushing into god knows who, so I decided that I'm gonna play it a little bit towards the islands. Unfortunately, my DDs are not really the brightest, such as this Yamagiri that actually ran into me and I was dragging him more where the battlefield is. So for whatever reason he went from the middle. Enemy DDs also are mirroring the dampness of my own by suiciding into a secondary cruiser, which we exploited to the fullest. After this, I tried to place myself around this position and pressure enemies with my secondaries, however, with no spotting from our allies. I basically just had to reserve myself to going a little bit closer. My plan was to play defensive around this part, but the moment I saw the Valparaiso get so close to me, I decided that I cannot just let him push me like this. So I went outside. Enemies were already hooked up a little bit and there was no dangers for me in terms of torpedoes. Notice how I just stopped in front of the nose of the firepower because I know he doesn't overmatch me, so I try to wait for his shot to go for a torpedo attack. That it was basically a free farm damage. We don't really care about those battleship crossfiring as he's basically fighting all our team anyway. And our citadel is just durable enough. We focus on dodging the people that are point blank. There's really no much more hidden philosophy. If I had more spotting from allies, I would be sitting behind that island in the beginning, farming a little bit more. But, well, as you have seen, we don't really need that to get the decent game anyway. To sum things up, those ships are not a replacement for a secondary BB. They are not open water kiting or sniping cruisers, and they are definitely not forgiving. High risk, high pressure cruisers for people who know when to go in, where to stop, and how to utilize being both heavy and a light cruiser in one. They're definitely very hard to play, but also very fun once you actually master them. So if there are some Shlieffen enjoyers that prefer a little bit a reserve playstyle, or just something that is a little bit more precise, or just the guys that want a little bit of a control and aggressive ship rather than where you just press W and push in, those ships are for you. However, if you kind of panic under focus fire and you will want to rely more of a dodging rather than positioning, or you just want something that's consistent but low effort, avoid those ships. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been Senpai Silent. See you next time.